Have you ever noticed how much energy you waste trying to prove you're right? We argue, defend, and posture, not to understand, but to win. That's the ego at work, the invisible mask, whispering, "You must be someone." Nietzsche called this the will to power, the deep human urge to assert our existence. But here's the irony. The louder our ego shouts, the less real we become, because behind every defense, there's fear. Fear of being seen as small. And that fear quietly runs most people's lives, without them ever realizing it. Ego doesn't just live in arrogance. It thrives in insecurity too. Most people think ego is pride, that loud, confident energy that fills the room. But ego is much more subtle. It hides in your need for recognition, in your discomfort when ignored. It's there when you check your reflection, not in the mirror, but in people's reactions. Nietzsche believed ego is not evil, but necessary, a tool for creation. It's what pushes us to grow, achieve, and define ourselves. But when it rules us, we stop living, we start performing. The artist begins painting for applause, not expression. The thinker begins talking to impress, not to understand. The real tragedy: most of us build our entire identity on what others see. We mistake visibility for value. The louder the applause, the higher our self-worth. But Nietzsche would call this slave morality, living for approval, rather than power. When your worth depends on someone else's opinion, you've already surrendered your mind. You become a puppet, controlled by praise, destroyed by silence. The ego doesn't want truth, it wants validation. And validation is a drug that never fully satisfies. Each hit feels good, until the craving returns stronger. There's a moment in every life, when the ego cracks, when success feels hollow. You achieve, you win, you rise. Yet something inside remains restless, Nietzsche said. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how, but most people never find their why, because they're too busy proving their who. That's the sickness of ego. Confusing meaning with image. You build an empire for the mirror, not for your soul. And when the applause fades, all that remains is noise inside your head. You don't know who you are without your reflection. Overthinking, comparison, jealousy, all are symptoms of an ego that's terrified of being ordinary. It constantly measures itself against others to stay alive, but in that race, you lose touch with your essence. Nietzsche urged humans to transcend, to become the Bermensch, the higher self, not by destroying ego, but by mastering it. He didn't want us to be humble, he wanted us to be real. True strength is not in being right, it's in being whole, and wholeness begins where ego ends. Ego builds walls, not to protect, but to separate. You think it keeps you safe, but it only isolates you from life itself. Every time you defend your pride, you close the door to growth. Nietzsche saw this in society. People pretending to be moral, but only seeking power. Even humility can be ego's disguise. Look how humble I am. The ego doesn't care if it's admired or pitied, as long as it's noticed. That's why silence scares us. It's the death of the performance. But only in silence can you meet your true self. Think about the moments you felt disrespected or ignored. Did it hurt because they were wrong, or because your ego felt unseen? The human mind confuses dignity with dominance, Nietzsche warned. The need to be superior is the ego's addiction. It thrives on comparison. And comparison kills peace. The moment you stop needing to be more, you become limitless. Because freedom isn't about control. It's about detachment. And detachment is the only victory the ego cannot fake. Most self-improvement advice today secretly feeds the ego. Be better, be stronger, be richer, be more successful. It's still the same chase, just with a spiritual disguise. Nietzsche would laugh at that, because to him, evolution wasn't about ego polishing. It was about shedding illusions and facing chaos directly. He believed that power isn't dominance, it's self-mastery. When you face your flaws without shame, the ego loses its grip. That's the real transformation. Quiet, unseen, but absolute. The ego hates vulnerability, because vulnerability kills the illusion of control. You'd rather lie than admit weakness, even to yourself. But Nietzsche saw truth as the highest courage to stand naked before existence, when you stop protecting your image. Reality starts healing you. The cracks in your pride are not your failure. They're your entrance to freedom. Pain dissolves ego faster than meditation ever could. That's why life keeps breaking you, not to punish, but to awaken. Every fall strips away another layer of illusion. Ego isn't just personal, it's cultural. Nations, religions, companies, all build their identity on being better than the rest. Nietzsche saw how collective ego creates wars of ideology and belief. People kill for symbols, defend lies, and worship illusions of greatness. The tragedy. Every system that claims truth secretly worships power, and every ego, individual or collective, fears being wrong. But truth doesn't need defense. Only ego does. If you must prove it, it's already fragile. You can spot an ego-driven life by its noise, constant activity, endless goals, endless validation seeking. But peace and ego can't coexist. One must die for the other to live. Nietzsche described this as the struggle of creation versus conformity. The artist kills his ego to create. The crowd feeds its ego to belong, and that's the choice you face daily: authenticity or applause. Both demand a price, but only one gives freedom. You can't serve two masters: truth and image. The ego fears death, not physical death, but the death of identity. That's why letting go feels terrifying. It feels like disappearing. But Nietzsche believed that only through death comes rebirth. To be free, you must allow parts of yourself to die. The false pride, the mask, the roles. That's the path of the Bermensch, the one who creates new values from the ashes. It's not destruction. It's evolution. You don't lose yourself. You find what was real underneath. Ego dies. Essence survives. Notice how people cling to titles: doctor, artist, entrepreneur, influencer. Those labels become their identity. But Nietzsche would ask, who are you without them? If your worth vanishes when the title does, it was never yours to begin with. Ego needs identity. Soul needs truth, and the two are rarely the same. The moment you stop clinging to what you are called, you begin to discover what you actually are. Not a label, but a living force. Ego is not confidence, it's compensation. It fills the silence of self-doubt with noise. True confidence doesn't need to be seen. It simply is. Nietzsche called this the yes to life, accepting imperfection without resistance. When you embrace your chaos, you no longer hide behind ego. And that's what makes you powerful, not perfect, but real. Power begins when pretense ends, and only those who have met their own darkness can walk in light. Here's a paradox Nietzsche loved. You can't fully live until you stop needing to win. Ego measures life by victories. But the soul grows through defeats. Failure humbles you in ways success never can. It cracks the shell that ego hides behind, and once that shell breaks, you stop fighting life. You start flowing with it. Nietzsche believed tragedy was sacred. It reveals your truest self. The self that doesn't perform, doesn't prove, doesn't beg, just is. Think of how exhausting it is to constantly manage your image, what to say, how to look, how to seem okay. That's not living, that's ego maintenance. Nietzsche's philosophy cuts straight through that illusion. He invites you to live dangerously, not recklessly, but authentically. To stop editing your existence, to please the audience, because there's no growth in perfection, only in honesty. And honesty begins the moment you stop performing. The ego loves comfort, but growth lives in chaos. Nietzsche said, one must still have chaos in oneself, to give birth to a dancing star. Chaos is not confusion, it's the raw material of transformation, but ego fears it, because chaos can't be controlled. So you build routines, beliefs, and habits, cages that feel safe. But safety kills creativity. To evolve, you must risk being wrong, being lost, being imperfect. Only then does truth appear raw, unfiltered, alive. Nietzsche believed ego is a survival instinct that outlived its purpose. In a world where threats are emotional, not physical, ego becomes a cage. It protects your image, not your soul. You defend arguments like your life depends on them. But it doesn't. What you're really defending is the illusion of knowing, and that illusion keeps you from true wisdom. Because only an empty cup can be filled. Ego hates emptiness, but emptiness is the doorway to truth. Every argument, every jealousy, every fear of judgment, it's all ego screaming, see me. But the truth is, no one's really watching as closely as you think. Everyone's too busy defending their own image. The game of ego is endless, because it's played by the blind. Nietzsche saw this and laughed. The madness of humans trying to outshine ghosts. The only way to win the game is to stop playing. And when you stop, you feel something shocking. Peace. Not the peace of silence, but of liberation. There's a reason ego collapses during heartbreak or failure. It's the universe's way of pulling you back to truth when life breaks your image. It's inviting you to meet your essence. Nietzsche believed suffering refines the soul. It burns illusions away. That's why comfort addicts stay shallow. They never shed their masks. The fire that destroys also purifies. And if you can stand the burning, you'll meet the part of yourself that cannot die. That's where ego ends and life begins. Ego always asks, who's better? The wise ask, what's real? Nietzsche didn't want people to be humble sheep. He wanted lions who roared their truth. But the lion doesn't roar to prove, it roars to express. The difference is everything. When you act from ego, you seek domination. When you act from essence, you seek creation. And that's how power turns into art. Social media has become the ego's playground. It rewards appearance over depth, confidence over wisdom. Nietzsche predicted this, the rise of the last man, comfortable, distracted, and hollow. We pose not to connect, but to exist. We build digital mirrors to confirm our identity, but every scroll weakens our sense of self. You can't find yourself in reflections, you can only find yourself in silence. The biggest lie ego tells you is that you're not enough, and then it sells you ways to become enough. But enoughness isn't achieved, it's realized. Nietzsche believed the greatest act of rebellion is self-acceptance, to look in the mirror, flaws, chaos, pain, and say, yes, this too is me. That's the beginning of real power, because when you stop needing approval, you become untouchable. The world can't manipulate someone who has nothing to prove. Ego confuses identity with importance. It says, if I'm not admired, I don't exist. But existence isn't a contest. Nietzsche urged people to create their own meaning, not inherit it, to live by inner law, not outer applause. The ego builds its empire on sand. One storm, and it's gone. But a life rooted in authenticity, that's unshakable. Because truth doesn't need witnesses. You can't kill the ego, and you shouldn't. You can only tame it. Ego is your fire. It just needs direction. Nietzsche never preached humility. He preached self-overcoming. Turn your pride into purpose, your anger into fuel, your fear into art. That's how you rise above yourself. The goal isn't to destroy ego, it's to master it, because once you do, it stops being a mask and becomes your strength. There's a reason the ego fears silence. Because, in silence, its voice disappears, and what's left terrifies it. Truth. When you stop feeding it with comparison, attention, or judgment, it starves. And that's when something strange happens. Peace feels unbearable. You start craving noise again. Anything to distract from stillness. But Nietzsche believed only through stillness do you confront yourself. And only when you face yourself, truly face yourself, can you begin to transform. Ego dies in silence, but the soul is born there. The ego doesn't just live in success. It hides in failure too. When you say, I can't, I'm not good enough, that's still ego talking. It just wears a mask of self-pity instead of pride, because ego always keeps the story centered on you. Whether it says you're superior or broken, the obsession is the same. Nietzsche called this the vanity of victimhood. Even suffering becomes identity, but suffering isn't meant to define you. It's meant to free you. The moment you stop romanticizing pain, healing begins. You can spot an ego-driven person by one habit: defensiveness. They can't listen, can't be wrong, can't surrender. Because every disagreement feels like death to their self-image. Nietzsche saw this as weakness, disguised as strength. Real strength doesn't need to prove. It understands. The wise don't fight every opinion they observe. They know truth doesn't vanish because someone doubts it. But ego can't handle that kind of stillness. It feeds on resistance. Here's the cruel trick. Ego always wants recognition, but recognition never satisfies it. You get what you wanted, the applause, the praise, and within days, it feels empty again. Why? Because ego runs on scarcity. It survives only by convincing you that you need more. More success, more likes, more attention. Anything but peace, Nietzsche would say. The chase itself is the punishment. You think you're chasing meaning, but you're really running from stillness. And stillness is where real power waits. The ego feeds on duality. Me versus them, good versus bad, success versus failure. But life doesn't work in such clean lines. Nietzsche's philosophy dissolves those opposites. He invites you to embrace the chaos, because chaos doesn't destroy truth. It reveals it. The ego wants order, control, simplicity. But the universe doesn't bend to your identity. You either expand to match its complexity, or shrink behind your illusions. And shrinking is the true death most people live. Have you ever noticed how quickly people take offense today? That's the fragile ego culture Nietzsche warned about, long before social media. Everyone's desperate to be right, terrified to be questioned. But truth doesn't care about comfort. Nietzsche believed discomfort is divine. It pushes you toward awareness. Every time you feel offended, your ego is being exposed. The question isn't, why did they say that? It's, why did it shake me? Ego thrives on identity, and identity thrives on opposition. You only know who you are by knowing who you're not. That's why people cling to labels and tribes. It gives them something to fight for, but Nietzsche wanted humans to evolve beyond that, to create meaning, not borrow it. He believed the highest soul transcends categories. Neither follower nor rebel, neither sinner nor saint, just awake. And the awake are always misunderstood, because the egoic world fears those who don't play by its rules. When you truly see your ego, something shatters inside. It's like realizing the voice in your head, the one you trusted, was never really you. It was your defense mechanism, your armor, your ghost. Nietzsche called this moment the death of God, not religion, but illusion. When the false god of your ego collapses, life feels meaningless for a while. But that void is sacred. It's where you start building a life that's real. A life not based on how you look, but on what you are. That's the rebirth he spoke of. Chaos turning into creation. Every argument you've ever had, every jealousy you've ever felt, was ego trying to survive. It doesn't care about truth, it just wants control. You think you're defending your ideas, but you're really protecting your identity. Nietzsche would smile and ask, who are you without your beliefs? If the answer terrifies you, that's where you need to go. Because identity is comfortable, but truth is liberating. And liberation always begins with losing something you thought was you. That's how transformation starts, with surrender. The ego is the reason you can't fully enjoy success. You achieve something, but instead of peace, you feel pressure to maintain it. You can't relax because your worth is now tied to it. Nietzsche called this the prison of becoming, forever chasing, never arriving. The moment you stop chasing, you face an uncomfortable truth. You don't know who you are without the chase. But that realization is the doorway to awakening. When the ego stops running, the soul starts walking, and that walk slow, honest, unfiltered, is what peace feels like. Ego hates gratitude, because gratitude kills comparison. When you're thankful, you stop measuring, competing, proving. You just exist fully, quietly. That's why ego resists it. It thrives only in dissatisfaction, Nietzsche said. The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. Gratitude lifts you above ego's drama. It makes you untouchable. You stop needing to win because you've already arrived. And that's when life starts giving you everything you stopped chasing. The ego doesn't want love. It wants admiration. It doesn't want connection. It wants control. That's why relationships fail. People don't meet each other. Their egos do. Nietzsche saw love not as possession, but as expansion. To love someone is to let them be, not to own their reflection. Ego can't handle that freedom. It wants attachment, but love without freedom isn't love. It's control with a pretty name. And control always kills what it tries to hold. When you feel jealous of someone's success, it's not about them. It's your ego fearing irrelevance. It whispers, if they rise, you fall. But that's the illusion of scarcity, the lie that only one can shine. Nietzsche would say, admire, don't envy. Use their light to ignite your own. Because envy poisons creation, it keeps your energy trapped in resentment. The truly strong celebrate others' growth, because it proves growth is possible. Ego competes. Wisdom learns. Ego loves the past and the future, because it can't survive in the present. The present is too real. There's nothing to defend or achieve there. Nietzsche called the present the moment of becoming. It's where you stop thinking and start existing. But ego distracts you with memory and fantasy, replaying old glories, imagining new ones. It hates stillness because stillness kills illusion. But if you can stay in the present long enough, ego dissolves naturally. And what's left feels timeless, like peace itself. Most people spend their entire lives running from shame, that deep inner wound. Ego covers it with achievements, charm, or intellect. But Nietzsche saw shame as a kind of mirror. It shows you where your false self still hides. If you look closely enough, shame can free you. It exposes the lie that you must be perfect to be worthy. The soul doesn't need perfection, it needs honesty. And honesty begins where ego finally breaks. Because you can't heal what you still hide behind pride. Ego doesn't just distort how you see others. It distorts how you see yourself. You either think too highly or too lowly of who you are. Both are illusions. Nietzsche believed self-knowledge is brutal, but freeing. To see yourself clearly means losing all fantasies, both grand and pitiful. That clarity hurts, but it's clean pain. The kind that purifies, not poisons. And once you see yourself truly, ego can never fully return. The world teaches you to build a brand, not a self. But a brand is an illusion, a digital ego. Nietzsche warned about this long before the internet, the danger of external meaning. When your identity depends on perception, you're always performing, always scared to be unseen. But the real power comes from being invisible, from knowing who you are, even when no one's watching. That's where your real life begins, not online, but within. Ego creates an enemy out of every challenge. You start fighting everything, criticism, uncertainty, failure. But Nietzsche taught that resistance is energy misplaced. He said, what you resist, persists. Because energy follows attention, and ego loves attention. Even negative, the moment you stop resisting life, life starts flowing again. You don't fight the river. You learn to swim with it. That's not weakness, that's mastery. Here's something ego can't stand, laughter. Because laughter shatters its seriousness. Nietzsche loved humor, not as escape, but as wisdom. He believed the strongest souls can laugh at themselves, because when you can laugh at your ego, it loses all control. It can't shame you, can't manipulate you, can't enslave you. Laughter is rebellion against the false self. It's the sound of awakening. Ego seeks perfection, but perfection is stagnation. Growth is messy, painful, contradictory. Nietzsche celebrated imperfection as proof of being alive. He said, you must have chaos in you to give birth to a dancing star. That's not poetic, it's psychological truth. Your cracks are not flaws. They're your openings. Ego wants symmetry. Soul wants evolution. And evolution is never pretty, but it's always real. You can't fully see ego until you're willing to lose everything it built. Your image, your titles, your pride, they all must burn. That's what Nietzsche called the Great Death, not the end of life, but of illusion. It feels like losing yourself, but you're only shedding the costume. Once the ashes settle, what remains is something terrifyingly beautiful. Truth. Raw, unfiltered, and indestructible. Ego fears this moment, because it means freedom. And freedom is the only thing it cannot control. The more awakened you become, the subtler your ego gets. It stops bragging and starts pretending to be humble. It says, look how spiritual I am. Nietzsche warned, even wisdom can become vanity. The ego will wear any costume, even enlightenment, to survive, so your work never ends. Awareness must stay alive. Every time you think you're beyond ego, it grows another mask. That's why true humility is silent, not performative. Nietzsche's message wasn't to destroy the ego, it was to outgrow it. To use it as a tool, not as a master. You need ego to create, to express, to exist. But you must remember it's not you. Like fire, ego can cook your food or burn your house. It depends on how conscious you are. And consciousness is simply this: seeing without identifying, watching your ego dance, and choosing not to join. Eventually you'll realize the ego's greatest illusion, that it ever protected you. It didn't save you, it just distracted you from pain, from truth, from depth. Nietzsche believed suffering wasn't the enemy. Unconsciousness was. When you stop running from life, ego loses its power, and what's left isn't weakness, it's calm strength. The kind that doesn't need validation because it is validation. Existence itself becomes enough. In the end, ego isn't your enemy, it's your beginning. It's the rough stone that hides the diamond within. Nietzsche's entire philosophy was about transformation, turning shadow into art, chaos into creation. You don't escape ego by hating it, you transcend it by understanding it. And once you do, you stop living to prove, and start living to be. That's when the noise quiets, the masks fall, and truth finally breathes. That's not the death of ego, that's the birth of you.